Welcome to MCU Pod, your best stop for a fun, approachable discussion on all things MCU, with a particular focus on the upcoming slate of Marvel TV shows over on Disney+. I'm your host, Grant Davis, and alongside me is my co-host,
Mike Rudy Garcia. Am I going to say it or are you going to say it?
That's your cue. I don't know. I guess I could introduce you.
Okay, I'm just here because which one of these light, non-controversial MCU topics are we going to tackle first on the pod? Is it going to be the news that a Christian actor is playing a Muslim on Disney Plus's Miss Marvel, or we can take a look in the rear view, kind of re-examine the Tilda Swinton casting as the Ancient One in Doctor Strange, if you want to go there, or if you want to be more current, we can just talk about how fucking Hawkeye himself, Jeremy Renner, is just so good at flipping those houses. You know,
Ooh,
he's like
sweating about these topics.
He's like a real estate influencer, man.
I thought you were going to talk about like the topics at hand, about like government infiltration or examining mental health issues in WandaVision. You know, which of these shows are we going to really talk about? But yeah, that said, this is our debut episode. I think we plan on bringing in some guests here and there as we go along, people who are just also into the shows that we're discussing, some people that are just like experts in different areas of the MCU. But that said, I would go ahead and stress up front that we're enthusiasts, or at least I consider myself an enthusiast, not an expert on any of this. Just a big fan, excited to talk about all things Marvel with you. And we're trying to do this a bit timely because next Friday, January 15th, is the debut of WandaVision, the MCU's first official TV series. Because I don't think we include Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Daredevils and all that.
Yeah, well, it's Marvel's first Disney Plus streaming show. WandaVision. I think you said version.
Did I? WandaVision. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that the people at Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just so desperately wanted to be included in MCU, and they're like, nah.
Listen, I'm not a stan for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I will say throughout its 7-season run, which I was about to say 18-season run because it felt like that show just never ended, but
that show was the Eternals, I think.
The cool thing about that show is, like a lot of Marvel stuff, it took a lot of weird risks. You know, it really leaned into the weird.
Right.
But I think with these Disney Plus shows, we're really going to lean into the weird a lot more than ever before, which is why I'm excited to watch them.
Absolutely. So, this is not our first podcast endeavor here, Mike. Do you want to tell people about where we come from and why we're doing this?
Yeah. We are based out of Austin, Texas. Grant has been a part of the TV Dudes podcast for like over a decade. You were on that show.
Yeah.
I had a Marvel podcast before with Martin Thomas from Double Toasted here in Austin. With Nate Bliss, we did a TVI on Marvel, in which we talked about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all those other early Marvel shows that you decided to diss at the top of our show. But we also do Star Trek Discovery Pod, and it's been a huge passion of mine, Star Trek, for a long time, and I roped Grant into that one, being a Star Trek noob, and we built a really fun, positive community around the universe, the Star Trek universe, and this new iteration of Star Trek that is on a streaming service, not Disney Plus, CBS All Access.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what we're going to do here. We're going to come with a vibe that is, like you said, we're not experts, but we're enthusiasts. And I think we're going to be honest about our opinions about all the new Marvel content, this huge 2021 slate we're going to talk about coming up. But I think we're going to skew kind of positive because we're really excited about this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people that really want to just dig in and take jabs and be harsh about, any of these properties. We've seen plenty of Star Trek pods that will just, shit on that show.
Just monetize just the hate.
Right. And I don't think that's ever really been our angle. We want to talk about these because we are excited about them. We like what they've done with the universe, and we are looking for the positive generally. Yeah, that doesn't exclude us from pointing out where certain scenes are awful or where certain Thor 2 movies are just garbage. So
yeah, we're coming in, we're coming into this with a lot of positivity. But yeah, if we're always going to be honest, right? Just like we are on the Star Trek podcast. And I know we're just kind of like wading the ship into the waters of the MCU pod universe for the first time here, and we're kind of like feeling it out. But for me, like, I'm not the guy who's like here to be freeze framing the trailers and saying like inane shit like that Apple Watch Loki is wearing has a band that matches the clasp on Mordo's belt and Doctor Strange. So what the fuck? What does that mean for Doctor Strange too? Like, that stuff is fine.
That was perfectly like what a great Eric Voss impersonation that was.
Oh god. I like Eric Voss. I like him, but that stuff is cool. It's fine. And I know you lean into that stuff a little, and I can play along in that realm too, but I'm really just here to like celebrate this stuff and engage with the fandom.
I will try not to go off the deep end there.
No, that stuff is fun, but I think we're just here to celebrate what the MCU has given us and is giving us, and yeah, definitely to criticize it and talk about it on a somewhat deeper level. But like, the MCU is like the funnest, deepest, most entertaining cinematic universe of our time. So let's just like dive into it with some positivity and have a good time, right?
Yeah. And now we certainly recognize that we're not the first people to want to talk about the MCU verse. But we hope we're doing something unique and at least engaging with our audience, and that we do live streams of our show. And if you tune in at the time that we're going live, you can check it out, watch along with us, comment. We see some people already commenting over here on the side. And we like that kind of direct engagement where people can chat with us. We can put their comments up on the screen as we're talking about it and get a feel for not just what me and Mike are thinking, but what you, the audience, are also thinking about these shows, or what you're liking, what you're not. So with that in mind, since this is our first episode, go ahead and say that, yeah, you can find us over on YouTube at MCU Pod, and there you can go and subscribe to us, click notifications every time we go live. You'll be able to check out our show. Our one rule is don't be dicks and don't be shitty with your criticism. That's about it. I mean, criticism's fine. Don't be shitty.
And if you're not shitty and if you're wanting to talk to us in the chat or like directly engage with us in the live YouTube chat, just type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod at the front of your comment so we can easily see it during the stream and you can be part of the show, unless you're a dick.
Unless you're a dick. All right, yeah. So I already hit on people subscribing. We can just go ahead and jump ahead here. We don't have like a Patreon or anything. This is our first episode. We don't even actually have our podcast itself, the audio version up. So we just wanted to get out here and we wanted to try this out. Let's get to know. Let's let the audience know about our MCU tastes, I think, before we jump into talking about 2021 and all of the crazy stuff that's going on for the MCU. Mike, let me ask you, there's been is it like 21, 23 MCU films? What would you say are your top three?
I mean, it changes, right? It evolves, and not just with each movie that comes out, but with how I grow and change. This universe has been a thing, has been part of our lives since 2008, right? That's when Iron Man premiered for the first time. And I don't know, it the more I grow, the more I go back to these movies and I get more out of them, because unlike some other comic book or franchise movies, Marvel always leans into something deeper, and we get these characters who grow and change, and Marvel is not afraid to give us these surprising character evolutions. So it's always fun to like see where like Tony Stark is or where he ends up in Endgame and go back to those first scenes in Iron Man 1 and recontextualize the character that way. But I can only tell you what I'm into like right now.
Yeah, I think that's
So
fair.
right now my top 3 I really the original Iron Man just as a a really solid um story with great acting, and it's a classic. It's one that I will always go back to. I think it's one that the whole fandom can always go back to and be like, they nailed it with that one. And not only because like the idea that that's the one that started it all. Without that, I mean, I don't care about that. What I care about is that the movie is just fucking good. It just fucking hums,
Yeah.
and it's just a great story. And right now my number 2 is probably Thor Ragnarok, and that's just so rewatchable. And the way they reinvented that character and the vibe of that franchise, of the Thor franchise, like you were dissing Thor 2 earlier, was just amazing. And I guess I just lean into like the goofy space type of Marvel stuff because my number 3 right now is Guardians, and it switches between Guardians 1 and 2. Just I like the vibe of those movies. I like that James Gunn always makes them about something, even
Yeah.
though they're mostly about daddy issues. But I can relate to that. So
And mommy issues,
that's true. That's true.
parental issues. Yeah.
Parental issues. What about you? You got a top 3?
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying about Iron Man, and it is really rewatchable. There's something about the ending for me that is a little bit too small scale for the stakes. You know, it reminded me a lot of Fantastic Four with the kind of like small street brawl at the end. I'm like, Doctor Doom's trying to take over everything, but you guys are just gonna have like a battle on this little city block here. It just seemed almost too small for the rest of what was going on. But taking into consideration that this was the first movie kicking off everything, that movie's awesome. It's still such a fantastic movie. For me, I'm gonna have to say I agree with you on Thor Ragnarok. The comedic sensibility of that is such. It was so refreshing to get that after the first 2 Thor movies, which are already like Shakespearean to the point where it's eye-rollingly just absurd, like Kenneth Branagh kind of shit. Just cool it down, dude.
Yeah, those 2 movies put me into the Odin sleep for sure.
But to get this just Kirby-esque, awesome, wacky Taika Waititi sensibility comedy movie, it was like everything I wanted. And that's a very divisive movie. I know a lot of people just were not feeling it, but
Really?
I'm all about it. Oh, yeah. Some people will put their least favorite movie in the MCU as Thor Ragnarok. Like the comedy just didn't click for everyone.
Do they wear like the red hats and shit?
I don't know about that.
Is it those people?
I think it's just they're bad people.
Yes.
Regardless of their hats. If you didn't like Thor Ragnarok, you're just a bad person.
Might as well put on a red hat.
For me also, Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming, I think that was finally the realization of Peter Parker that I wanted, and how that story I think it also has one of the best villains in Michael Keaton's Vulture. I think the whole thing is just awesome. I love it from beginning to end, and I probably rewatched that one the most. So
really,
yeah, I just keep going back to it. I think that it has so many great action moments like interspersed throughout it, and the pacing's just pretty fantastic as a result. It just always keeps me engaged, and I like the ensemble. I like the comedic beats and the youth of it when everything else is skewed so much older. And usually I cross my arms at that, and I'm like, I don't need your CW young kid bullshit, but I liked it a lot. And then finally, I don't know. I mean, I was so torn between like, do I like Infinity War for its action sequences, or does Endgame just win out because of that final battle? Because I don't know if like Endgame all like holistically I enjoy, but there is that last 30 minutes that is some of the most intense theater going experience I've ever felt in my life, to the point where I'm like, I have to put that in my top 3.
That's when you're talking about a huge cinematic universe like this, you have to weigh that in, right? The experience that you had in the theater when you watched it, because that's what these movies, at least the first few phases, Marvel calls them phases,
right,
leaned into, especially after the first like Iron Man, because that's when they realized that's when that movie was a hit. Like you were talking about, the original Iron Man has kind of a street brawl ending, and I think Hulk did too. Wasn't all that spectacular, but after that, they really poured the money into these movies, and Endgame was the culmination of all that, and it was such a spectacle. So, just in our modern age, the feeling you get watching a spectacle like that in the theater can be so intoxicating. It'll stick with you for years, and for losers like us, for the rest of our lives. And so you have to weigh that into your favorites. Like, I almost wanted to put Endgame my number 1, but I somehow knew you're going to make it your number 1. So I was like, I'll leave it for Grant. But
I mean, I saw someone post that clip of the people in the theater watching the scene where they all come out of the what do you call him, Doctor Strange bubble.
Doctor Strange whirligig.
Yeah, the whirligigs.
It's the whirligig.
And just seeing how everyone else reacted in the theater immediately takes me back to my whole experience with just jaw drop on the floor. This is something I didn't think was attainable in film for these movies, in the way I digested these comics when I was younger. It's just,
you're so right. And aside from that, when you said maybe as a whole, that movie doesn't maybe work for you as a whole. It works for me in every level, because that one, if you think about everything before we get to that beautiful payoff of that action sequence with the entire universe fighting against Thanos, with that one, it just leans into the weird so much at the beginning. We get all this fucking weird time travel that is just asking like mass general audiences just to go with it, and just to accept that, a raccoon is going to get in the spacesuit and go back in time and meet 2 versions of Thanos' daughter, who is half blue cyborg. It's just crazy.
The whole thing is bonkers. And you're right. It's a culmination of what we all like. They held the general audience's hand so much that everyone, not just like the bigger geeks, were on board for how weird it could go.
Yes.
And
they earned it.
Probably the tip of the iceberg, given where we're going in phase 4.
Yes. And that's what makes this time really, really exciting.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's phase 4? I mean, or what are these phases? This is just how they group the first set of movies, where they do the introduction, the second set of movies where they bring in some secondary characters, third set of movies that ended up in Infinity War and Endgame, in which they established who their big bad was going to be. Well, they kind of established it at the end. Like, Thanos pops up at the end of Avengers in phase 1, but really makes himself known all throughout phase 3, where it gets like, it really ratchets up. It seems like with phase 4, now they're going full on interdimensional time travel, and this is going to be their kind of gateway to bringing in like Fantastic Four and all of the multi-dimensional stuff that like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse already kind of touched on. It's gonna be bonkers.
I mean, what's about the Disney shows, especially, what's exciting for me about all these new Marvel Disney Plus shows, and that's what we're going to cover first. Right. Oh, and JC, who's commenting, says best is the Endgame scene turned into 2020 election characters.
Did you see that? It's so ridiculous.
I haven't seen that. Oh, did you find it? We should play it. But
man, I watched it. I was like, what am I seeing here?
Like these Marvel Disney Plus shows, they all seem to be about these like fantastical, heroic characters that we come to know over several of these great Marvel movies, having major identity crisis, both in the fictional universe and outside of it. Like Marvel itself is like, here are the characters we have that are bankable, the ones we didn't kill off or turn into an 80-year-old man. What do we do with them now? How do we reinvent them for the small screen and keep the audience engaged? So I think with WandaVision, with the Winter Soldier show, and even we're getting like characters dealing with reinvention and identity crisis, and that is like really fertile ground for drama.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So do you want to go ahead and take a look at the slate of movies that we have coming up here?
We have a slate. Let's look at it.
Okay. So given the fact that there was a whole pandemic in 2020, it pushed everything back to the point where they're just going to roll out so many films and so many TV shows all this year. Like last year, during a pandemic when everyone's at home and really could have used it, Marvel got stingy. They didn't give it to us. But now we have okay, let me do the count here. We have 4 movies, which is huge. We have 6 TV shows all this year. So
it's 5. Oh, I was going to say 5 movies, but they pushed Thor to 2022, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So our movies include. Oh wait, let me. I had a graphic for it. I'm not going to do this consistently. Our movies include Black Widow.
Yeah.
Which is due out May 7th. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I guess is going to be. They haven't really shown a whole lot for this one. But I wonder how much it's going to play into the Mandarin, who was the big bad of the fake big bad of Iron Man 3. Sorry if I'm spoiling something 5 years later.
But we know that the real, quote unquote, real Mandarin is out there, right? In the MCU because of the short that they did with Ben Kingsley about him. Yeah, that was established in the short that followed Iron Man 3, in which I don't know. It was established. I didn't watch it, but it was established somehow that the real, quote unquote, real Mandarin is out there.
Right. And then we have the Eternals, which has somehow more artwork associated with it than we've seen anything from Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi's July, by the way, and we still haven't really seen anything. We've got like 1 million trailers for Black Widow in May, although that one got pushed back, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
But Eternals, we already see at least some concept art of their massive casts in their costumes. And you were just talking to me about, reading the comic for this a while ago, right?
Yeah, it was a Neil Gaiman version of Eternals that I really loved, and I think that came out about a decade. It was a limited Marvel comic series, and I think that is what mostly this new film is based on. And what was great about it was that each issue kind of took one character realizing their power, and it's kind of an origin story for all these Eternals characters, but the way it did it was so human and personal. And then by the time it got really like mystical and weird, it just felt really earned and good. And once the comic really got super fantastical, and all the battles were happening, you really cared about all the characters because you saw them go through this transformation. It's just good stuff.
Yeah. I recognize, like, I can imagine the covers in my head of that comic, so I think I read it.
The artwork is
remember it right now. Yeah. Jumping back to Shang-Chi, JC was saying I'm not crazy about martial arts movies, but I read a spoiler potentially, and if it's true, seems pretty cool. I don't know what that is, but I'm excited for that movie.
Does Shang-Chi have an iWatch with
the belt buckle
with a buckle that looks like Mordo's buckle, and then Sam Raimi's working that into Doctor Strange too?
As James Worm says, I'm down for Shang-Chi. I snoozed through Iron Fist, and Iron Fist I think was the worst of the Netflix shows. It was just the worst casting.
It could have been fun. It could have been so cool, but they got a terrible showrunner, the guy who ran Dexter into the ground, same showrunner, and just the cast was just so vanilla and plain and boring.
Oh, and he was sporting that Justin Timberlake 1999 hair, that top ramen hair. It's just
top ramen.
I say that, but then I think I had the same hairstyle back then. Okay, we also have the Untitled Spider-Man Far From Home sequel, the third in the movie franchise. And this is the movie that we've been hearing a whole bunch of rumors and speculation about, like this casting of like Alfred Molina from Spider-Man 2.
Hayden Christensen reprising his role as Darth Vader in this movie.
Oh no, I don't remember this news. But yeah, it's gonna have Tobey Maguire. It's gonna have Andrew Garfield. It's gonna have like the other Spider-Man characters. It's gonna have Electro's Jamie Foxx's Electro in there. It seemed. I've heard theories about what this movie's gonna be, and the theory goes that if they, for a while, they were talking about Kraven being the bad guy, Kraven the Hunter, and he's this hunter who has hunted all the animals, and yet the last big game for him is man, but not just man, superhuman man, aka Spider-Man. So he goes to hunt Spider-Man. But what if he's an interdimensional hunter and he's hunting and killing off Spider-Man in all the dimensions? So it's kind of like that Jet Li movie, The One, but with Kraven the Hunter killing them off in all these other iterations. So maybe we'll see these just quick scenes of them dying before he jumps over to the version where there's a 15-year-old kid he has to try and kill, and that's the most difficult one. I don't know. I like that idea.
That's fine.
Not a spoiler, because I mean, how do I know at this point? Yeah, okay, let's jump in and talk about the TV shows, because the movies, we're going to talk about them one-off, right, when they come out. But the TV shows can be an ongoing discussion, provided it looks like Disney Plus is planning to release the episodes weekly. So I thought we should go ahead and watch the trailers. I hope this isn't like some weird thing we're going to get pinged for, but we'll find out.
If it is, it is. And we're going to start with WandaVision, right?
Let's start with WandaVision.
All right.
Let's pull it into the stream.
And that premieres next Friday, a week from today.
Yeah. And
so what's a single gal like you doing rattling around this big house?
I love Catherine Hahn.
Well, I assure you, I'm married to a man, a human one.
One.
Catherine Hahn, the monkeys. I'm in love already.
Usual couple.
Bewitched.
Oh, I don't think that was ever in question.
We just don't know what to expect.
Howdy, neighbors. Hey, bud.
Getting Legion vibes. FX's Legion.
Wanda,
Yeah, big time.
who are you?
I don't know.
I think something's wrong here.
Wanda, can you read me? Who's doing this to you?
Are you here to help us? This is our home.
Then let's fight for it.
Well, I think we handled that well.
That is a far cry from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, right. Remember that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show? Oh, boy.
I think, like what I was talking about before with like these characters like being reinvented for the small screen, but in a way in which we can tell longer, stranger, dramatic stories. Like with this WandaVision, you have Scarlet Witch. It seems like she's literally warping her own reality.
Yeah.
Like desperately trying to create like a time and a space in which she can truly belong and cope after what happened between her and Vision in in the MCU, and she has to heal. And from what we saw in that trailer and the marketing material, she's like trying on these new roles for herself that are like just so wildly different than the role that we've seen her play in the larger MCU as established. And that's just a signal of like Marvel is trying to they're banking on the credibility and the popularity these characters have built with people like us, with the fans, but they're delivering them in new packages and putting them, reshaping them and presenting them in such a new way.
I love that they're not dumbing this down to the audience and treating them like they need to spoon feed a story, right?
Yeah.
This is high-end conceptual storytelling. It is very akin to Legion. It definitely is playing off of this House of M idea from the comic books, where Scarlet Witch at one point has a complete mental break and basically rebuilds the entire world, if not universe. I want to say at least just the world of the Marvel world, and then eventually it gets to a point where she kills off like most of the mutants on the planet, and the ones that are left are the ones that kind of have to rebuild, and then they're even more of an oppressed minority, and it kind of plays into that whole storyline for like the X-Men and whatnot. But Marvel's or the MCU's approach here to that same sort of storytelling is to once again have Wanda have this kind of mental break, and as a result, she's formed her own reality, and we can't really tell if what the bounds are of this reality and what the ramifications of this reality are. Like, are we going to see her brother Quicksilver pop in here?
Do you want to see him back? I like that iteration of Quicksilver.
I do. I like the idea that she has such a bizarre and like probably ill-defined set of powers that the idea that she could potentially just bring people back to life through sheer willpower of her abilities is crazy. Like, she can adjust reality around her and reshape it. And this also reminds me of that show Maniac over on Netflix, the Jonah Hill and Emma Stone one, where they both are kind of lost in this reality of the mind that has them kind of jumping through different genres a little bit. Like, here she's clearly going through different iterations of TV shows. There's like Bewitched, there's like a Three's Company kind of vibe going on, and then a Roseanne in the 80s kind of thing with a little bit of that 70s show kind of just sprinkled in, even though it's a 90s show. And it all feels, I just love like all the graphics and how those are being dropped in to like show Vision wearing the outfit.
Right.
And Kat Dennings pops up. All of this is so super fascinating to me. And it's going to be one of those shows that is going to be a lot of fun to just like pour over each episode and dissect and discuss and kind of figure out what's going on. Which we have a comment here from James Worm who says, is she confirmed Inhuman? What are her powers from the MCU? The movie flipped her origin upside down in the comics, which is, as a result of like legal issues of not owning the rights to mutants initially, because those were owned by Fox. They wanted to, there's a slippery slope, a little bit of gray area in being able to introduce Wanda Maximoff and Peter Maximoff as not mutants, but potentially like Inhumans. They have these abilities that don't have to be constrained to X-Men characters, but now that they own it and they haven't really fully defined where their powers came from prior to, I think there was like hinting that like it might have been something to do with the Tesseract or whatever.
I think that was heavily hinted at in the second Avengers movie.
But I wonder if this show is going to be a sort of predecessor to integrating the X-Men into the MCU. Is the ultimate finale payoff of this season of this show going to be that she brings Vision back to life, and she causes X-Men to be integrated into society.
Yeah, and that's really exciting. But here's the thing, like, even if that is like the ultimate payoff, like aside from the Vision thing, if we really do get like an inversion of the House of M from Marvel, where she like decimates the mutant population.
Yeah.
Even if this pays off at the end with of the first season, or maybe it's a limited series, with an inversion of that, with her like inventing mutants or bringing mutants in, that's great. That's great for the like Marvel's, for the MCU going forward. But I'm really interested more in learning more about this character and getting like experiencing her healing from her trauma. Right. That's where I'm at. I'm like, give me a story, and if it has all these other little tendrils that shape the rest of the universe, that is just icing on the cake. But I think with Marvel's credibility and all the projects they've done in the past, and with how much they're banking on these new shows, we're not just going to get like little placeholders until the big movies come out. That's not what WandaVision is.
No.
This looks like a crazy, weird, deep character story that, yeah, will have ramifications for the rest of the universe, but it can also stand on its own.
Yeah. I mean, when you mentioned the idea of it being a limited series, I wonder how much you could continue to explore after a first season of a show that's kind of predicated on the concept that she's suffering a delusion, a mental break. Like, can you kind of extend that multiple seasons?
Legion did.
I was gonna say Ask Legion, I guess.
Yeah.
They did. But there's got to be kind of a radical jump, and how these characters will still fit into the larger film franchise after this show is going to be interesting, because I feel like there still would have to be a little bit of an end resolution that can keep it sort of self-contained so that it isn't messing up the larger universe. Like, you know, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of suffered from this, where they could never do anything too big, and they were always playing catch up on what happened in the film. So like when Winter Soldier came out and then all of S.H.I.E.L.D. was destroyed as a result of it being infiltrated by Hydra, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. suddenly, it seemed like they had to scramble to be like, oh, us too, guys, and we're secretly keeping the fire and trying to rebuild. And then she was like, we don't really care about you, Redheaded stepchild.
Yeah, by the end of that show, they literally created their own timeline, so the events of that show would not conflict with the larger MCU.
Yeah. Well, so that's the show that we're going to be discussing.
Yeah. And I want to mention our commenter earlier, James Worm, reached out to us before and suggested that we do our homework and read like the most recent acclaimed WandaVision comic series, which it seems like this show is largely riffing on or based on.
Yeah.
I haven't read that yet.
I
don't know if I'm going to.
Last time I read a comic, it's been a while.
Get the Marvel app, man. The Marvel app has everything, and it's like $10-$12 a month.
The bonus is that I'm screwing over comic book shop owners by not
our buddies who own comic shops in town, do not listen to this, please. Get the Marvel app, sample their wares, and then go buy the real thing.
Okay, so the next show is The Falcon and Winter Soldier, which debuts March 19th. Let's go ahead and check out the trailer here for that.
The legacy of that shield is complicated.
I love their music cues.
The world.
They cut Bucky's hair.
People need something to get behind.
I need the symbol.
I'm loving all the wide framing shots in here.
Yeah.
So what's our plan? So no plan. Great.
So this is like the good Hobbs and Shaw, right?
What a way to frame it. Yeah, sure.
Like Hobbs and Shaw, but good. I think the volume cut out.
I mean, look how awesome that is. TV budget.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Disney Plus TV budget.
They got that Mando money, which I've contributed to.
That cyborg brain of yours. You don't want to know. Oh, yeah, I can see it working. Gears turning. Oh, they're malfunctioning. They're on fire. God, I hate you.
All right, and here's an example of like not necessarily leaning into the weird, but leaning into the charm, leaning into the idea that these characters have to redefine and reestablish like who they are, right? Because
Right.
Falcon and Winter Soldier, who are they without Cap? Who are they when paired with each other? What are their roles now within the Avengers, within the fictional MCU landscape? Again, just these powerful, larger than life characters going through these role changes and evolutions throughout like a 10-hour series. That's just fertile ground for great drama.
And how do you pick up the slack when Cap just leaves the universe?
Yeah.
Suddenly there's this
Pieces out.
power vacuum and the enemies are still going to be at the gates and they have to suddenly deal with that. So this one does seem a little bit more like a grounded political thriller in a way, and buddy team up. So it's really banking on the dynamic between Winter Soldier and Falcon. I think that they were fun enough together. I don't know. I'm a little bit mixed on how I feel about it. I would say of the 3 shows or 4 shows that we're going to discuss today, it's probably the one I'm least excited for.
Yeah. I thought I was more excited for WandaVision, but I'm actually more excited for Falcon and Winter Soldier because I want it just, and maybe I'm giving it too much esteem, but it just seems so baseline and mainstream, even though it looks really good, that I want to be surprised by it. Because this is the MCU. If you think about the MCU, even with their most like easy to sell movies, there's always some weird twist or just something unexpected that is at the core of those movies. And I'm hoping we're going to get something like that here. It's more than it seems, I think.
Yeah, James says the Ed Brubaker run of Bucky, Falcon, and Sharon picking up the pieces after Cap's death is really, really good.
Yeah,
and
I read some of that.
this definitely has a Brubaker vibe to it, which should be awesome, I guess. I don't know. I think it'll be good. I don't know why I'm reticent about it. There's no good reason.
Well, I mean, how did you feel about all the Cap movies? Were they not your favorites? I know they weren't on your list.
I loved Winter Soldier. I thought Civil War was still a lot of fun, even if it was just like one little airport hangar battle. It was cool to see everyone on screen, and it was a great test case for what they obviously built up to in Endgame. But yeah, I don't know. I think it also has a little bit of this vibe of like a Jack Ryan TV show, so that kind of makes me struggle a little bit.
But the scope seems much wider, and the budget is much bigger than good old John Krasinski running around with a CIA badge or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But I think we are going to get like I like espionage thrillers, like that movie Spy Game, which is garbage. I love that movie. Just 'cause it's a cool spy thriller, and I think that's what we're going to get here, along with these characters growing and changing and trying to figure out who they are with the absence of that power vacuum of Cap.
Right. I mean, all things considered, this is definitely a show I'm gonna watch versus the million other shows that come out on TV that I'm never gonna watch ever. So it's a top tier show still.
Also, I hope they keep the idea of what a true patriot is that we got from the Captain America movies. Like Captain America was the patriot who goes against the government when the government is being evil and reckless, and is sometimes not a popular hero because he's being a patriot. And that is a very timely
Dicey
theme.
territory. That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see how they thread that needle. We'll see what the national conversation is in 3 months, 2 months. Oh boy.
It's gonna feel like 3 years.
Right. Okay, let's jump over and take a look at Loki as well here.
Talk about weird.
Yeah.
Get your hands off.
Iron Man. Waking up in the sand. Man, look
You're
at
taking
that.
me somewhere to kill me.
No, I'm taking you someplace to talk.
Well, I don't like to talk.
But you do like to lie, which you just did. Because we both know you love to talk.
Again, such a Noah Hawley TV vibe.
It's hard to say,
Right.
time passes.
Like
How's he not
WandaVision
making
for
all
the
these?
TVA. What does that mean? You'll catch up.
Noah Hawley did Legion, for those of you who don't know Noah Hawley, who is our neighbor here in Austin.
Our best friend.
He's on the couch. You see, this is so unexpected from a Loki story. All of this.
Right?
Yeah.
It also feels like Hannibal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, these shows are telling their own stories, building their own pockets in this larger universe, and doing it earnestly.
And
Like,
look at that. He's
great.
DB Cooper in that scene.
Love it.
Come on. What did you expect?
Oh, Loki, you scamp.
Wow. Yeah, like you said, unexpected. That one's really, really bizarre. And it seems like it's going to be this kind of procedural where he's a time cop. He's going to regulate people mess with the time stream begrudgingly because he has a certain set of skills. So he just kind of gets pulled in and forced to it.
It's interesting because it's a different iteration of Loki we're getting on Disney Plus. It's a version of Loki who has not yet paid for his crimes, right? Because this is Loki they plucked out of the first Avengers movie. So like right after the siege of New York, and he has no real sense of regret or redemption or any of those good things that Loki had at the end before he was taken out by Thanos. So he's being thrust into this wacky role apparently as the MCU Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap, which is something I never thought I would see. But apparently, yeah, the apparatus or the syndicate that he is working for in this is apparently like alive in the Marvel comic universe, but it's like so niche that almost no one's ever heard of it. Like apparently there is this type of like agency that goes throughout time and corrects stuff that Owen Wilson's involved with. So they're like pulling like the strangest, weirdest Marvel U and grafting it onto to the MCU's biggest, like most charming villain and creating a new story from it. It's just a great idea.
Totally reminds me of like what's going on with Umbrella Academy as well, with these time police that are meant to kind of keep everything in the time stream going in the proper order. But yeah, the take on it, it's all really tonally dark and surreal, and just gives me this vibe that I'm going to be shown a very alien world and perspective with this show. And once again, this is Marvel just swinging for the fences. They're not playing safe with a simple Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. procedural here with any of their shows. They aren't, like, even if this does have a little bit of an episodic nature with him going on a mission here or there, their end game there is not for this to be a procedural ongoing. There's obviously an arc for where they're going with Loki's character that's going to have larger ramifications for the MCU. And it's fascinating to see this.
And another fascinating kind of a behind the scenes thing about all these shows that we just watched the trailers for, all of the showrunners, the people who are like the architects of the vision here, are really young filmmakers who have really just had their breaks in the past like decade. So they're not like going back to an established like ABC, miniseries showrunner or somebody who had a great run on CBS. These are like young filmmakers who probably grew up watching the MCU and diving into those comics, and who have just wild ideas for how to tell stories with these established characters in a new way. It's kind of what Marvel did before when they brought Jon Favreau and James Gunn and people like that on. These were like definitely kind of names in certain, film fan circles, but really like untested with like these huge properties, and it paid off so well.
It still makes me think, like Taika Waititi, they bring in for Thor Ragnarok, and it's radically different from what we've come to expect of the Thor films thus far. Really leaning much more into that comedic sensibility and just the bizarre and surreal. But additionally, this is the same company that could not seem to work with Edgar Wright on Ant-Man, and they gave him the boot, or he quit, or whatever happened there. And that makes me wonder, like, what was going on there that Edgar Wright's vision couldn't work out, but Taika Waititi's vision for Thor 3 could.
Yeah, I never quite understood what happened there, and we never will. But I think it feels like Marvel maybe has learned from that. They learned, okay, we were too afraid to lean into this visionary's idea for this property, and that cost us.
And Ant-Man was just a little bit, vanilla. It was good.
Yeah,
still,
I don't think Ant-Man is really anybody's favorite, MCU franchise. It's fine. They're fun movies, and I'll go watch them. But it's like they're like Diet Cokes, like they're in and out. I forget about them right when I'm walking out of the theater.
Right. Well, Loki is slated to debut in May this year. In the summer, our last one that I was going to show you a clip of is What If.
Oh, yeah.
Because
this was one of my favorite comic series as a kid. Just like mashing characters together who you'd never see together and reimagining like giant events in the Marvel universe. And like, oh yeah, let's watch this.
So What If is predicated on the multiverse, and what if there's a different version of the iconic events that we've already grown to know and love in the MCU?
Yeah,
that's basically what it is, but this is an animated take.
What if Tony Stark had two dicks? Something like that.
Whatever you desire, Mike.
Space.
It's Jeffrey Wright narrating.
It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility.
Well, that doesn't sound ominous at all.
Chills with that music.
I was promised.
Yeah.
Captain Britain.
You have a super soldier.
Fuck yeah.
Just honoring Peggy that way is so cool.
You sure don't seem too freaked out about all this, kid. What you
Black
doing
Panther
out there all by
Star-Lord?
yourself anyway?
Exploring the world.
Sounds
Yandu.
But why stop at one world when we can show you all of them?
I am the Watcher.
Watcher.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and dare to face the unknown.
Marvel Zombies.
Yeah.
And ponder the question. What if?
Give me the tour.
Doppelgangers. Hell yeah. It's so cool that it seems like the character of the Watcher is gonna be like bookending these tales or telling these tales, because that's what it was like in the comic book. And the Watcher is this character that lives outside the universe and comments on it, and of course watches it. But he always I always found that the character was so cool because they had this sense of strange, mystical otherworldliness to them, but also like some really quick wit too, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So that's going to be like a fun narrative device to watch with these crazy stories that are just mixing and matching all types of shit from the Marvel U.
The animation looks incredible on
Does.
this. The dramatic cinematic moments that they're still able to build to and play off of, like these moments where you see Bucky catch the shield and throw it back, but instead it's a zombie Captain America. These are all these like really cool one-off or mini-series comics that they're able to bring to life here in this show. And it's further evidence of the direction that I think Phase 4 is going with, and that it's really exploring the multiverse, and it's exploring a little bit of time travel as well, and breaking the rules and conventions that are eventually going to lead to King the Conqueror being the new big bad of the Phase 4 arc, I believe. And that's also going to play into Ant-Man and the microverse, like that little universe or that little civilization you see in the pocket verse when he's trapped in there for a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, whatever that was, where Janet Van Dyne was living.
You kind of got to feel bad for DC because like a few years ago they're like, yeah, man, we're doing the multiverse thing and we're gonna do it right. Marvel doesn't have that shit. Well, just you wait.
Oh, DC. Every time I think of them, I'm just like, oh man, Christopher Nolan like held you guys for a little bit, and
Yeah.
then you lost everything. You bet on the wrong people to guide your franchise, and oh well.
Well,
There are some people that seem to swear by it.
yeah,
that ain't
I'm good for them.
just rounding out what we have looking forward to this year on the calendar. Hawkeye is going to get his own spin-off show with what's her name? Arrow Girl. I'm forgetting the name of his protege.
Yeah.
Kate Bishop. And then there's going to be a Miss Marvel TV show that's going to be playing off of what's Miss Marvel's name in
Kamala Khan.
Kamala Khan. That's right. That's going to be probably just late this year, if not pushed back to next year, just because they have so many shows. They've also announced a Moon Knight and a She-Hulk.
Yeah, I think those are the two we really haven't seen anything from in terms of like set pictures or, of course, trailers or anything. With Miss Marvel, I think they had like a super short bit of a scene in a larger like MCU sizzle reel.
Right.
And Hawkeye, we've seen behind the scenes photos here and there from some of those clickbait sites like that you love, like Screen Rant.
My favorite. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. It's a great time for us to really want to dive in to everything MCU related. And I don't know, you and I are both just super excited about this. This is, of course, our test case episode. Next week, we are hoping to be back with the debut of WandaVision, talking about that in depth.
We're going to jump on that night, Friday night, on the stream.
Does that work for you?
That's fine with me.
Works for me. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in to our debut episode tonight and joining in on the chat. Stay tuned next week as we dive into discussing episode 1 of WandaVision. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and get the notification buttons going so that you get alerted whenever we go live. You can follow us on Twitter at MCU Pod. I'll be putting up more socials as we develop this little project of ours a bit better. But you can also check out our website, mcupod.com, for the upcoming audio podcast. Until next week,
I am Mike Moody Garcia.
And I'm Grant Davis. And we are MCU Pod. Go out there, kick names, and take ass.